Hi, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order here. I'm sorry I don't have my Dickie Patty gavel, but maybe you can hear Dickie Patty's gavel pounding. So let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with us as we take counsel for the renewal and mission of this your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Okay, everybody, thank you for those of you who are gathered here, and thank you to those who are Zooming here with us this morning. A few things as we get started here. For those of you who are Zooming, if you have any issues here, I hope you'll type them in the Zoom notes, and Jill or Father John will take care of it. You can also do info@stmarkscommunion.org, and they're monitoring all that. And they'll pick up.
And I look at that.
We need to vote on a few resolutions, and for those of you who've been here before, you know that these early ones are voice votes, and if you're they're done by hand, and if you're on Zoom, you can put on the hand, which is you'll see on your screen. Just also for those of you who are Zooming, as you may remember from last year, this is the third time we've done it on Zoom. There's only one vote per computer, and I know some of you are couples who are together on this. That means you either need another computer, or maybe you can get this pulled up on a cell phone so that both of you can vote, or else in this case, it's just a household vote. And also for those of you on Zoom, throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, you can type those in the Q&A box or in the chat box. And again, Father John and Jill will monitor those. And for those in the room, just raise a hand. Okay, so there we are with the hybrid works of pieces of business to start. So there's three of these, and so may I please hear a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of last year's annual meeting.
Okay.
All in favor, please say aye. Anybody opposed, please say nay. Okay, the second is dispense with the reading of the roll of eligible voters. May I please have a motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. I will say, if anybody nayed for either of those, we'd have to have them speak to a therapist. The third, gosh, I hope I haven't offended anybody here. The third, may I please have a motion to authorize the wardens, treasurer, and director of operations to borrow funds as necessary for the financial stability of St. Mark's Parish. Yeah, second, and all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, all of those motions carried. Stan, you're on.
Can people hear me?
So it's only by what's on the side of your face.
Oh, okay. So can people hear me okay? Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. I'm now just lost it. No, I got it. Oh, yes. I want to thank those who are departing, our leaders, departing leaders, retiring officers, mate, and we also retiring vestry members, Gabby Beecher, Rad Kerr, Lise Least, and Carrie Robinson. And retiring nominating committee members, Jack Donahue, Brian Hetherington, and Emily Morgan. Can we give them all a hand and thank them? Today, we're electing a total of 4 to the vestry for full 3-year terms. Please vote for the maximum of the numbers specified, 4 for vestry and 3 for nominating committee. Ballots with more than that number of votes will be disqualified. On Zoom, you must select at least one candidate in each of the 4 questions in order to submit your ballot. Keep scrolling until you have voted in all 4 questions and can click on the submit button at the bottom. One more thanks to everyone who is standing for election today. You have served the community by doing so, whether or not you are elected. And as Peter pointed out, the first time I ran, I lost. But we do appreciate your willingness to serve, to run. It really is a service to all of us, and I thank you all. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne Harrison, who will submit the nominating report.
Good morning. I'm Suzanne Harrison, and I, like Stan, lost for vestry the first time I ran as well. And I sort of feel like an imposter standing here this morning as co-chair of the nominating committee without my other chair, Lauren Clancy, because she did really the lion's share of the work cultivating the group of candidates that we have here today. Unfortunately, she couldn't be with us here this morning, so I'm standing here on her behalf and behalf of the rest of our committee. Anyway, we do have an amazing group of parishioners here this morning running for vestry this year, and I would like to invite that group to come before us or to raise their hand on Zoom as I call their name. First, I'd like to welcome the officers. As senior warden, we have Janet Frill. For junior warden, we have Mark Thorsheim. For treasurer, Tim Dan. And for vestry clerk, we have Libet Field. Vestry members nominated are Alix Armstrong, John Harrison, Joanne Renwick, Peter Ryan, John Sexton, and Kathy Ulane. Nominating committee members are Jeb Armstrong, John Michael Bain Cologne, Gabby Beecher, Brad Kerr, Carrie Robinson, and Lori Wyckoff. The candidates for the alternate diocesan convention delegates are Lise Least and Libet Field. Thank you.
Okay, so the question now is whether or not there's any nominations from the floor. And if there are nominations from the floor, you raise your hand, or if you're on Zoom, you type a name into the chat box. And if someone is nominated from the floor, I will do certain sort of things. So, are there any nominations for the floor for the vestry? Seeing none, we will close that. Are there any nominations from the floor for the nominating committee? Seeing none, we will close that. Are there any nominations from the floor for alternate diocesan convention delegates? And seeing none, those are all closed. And so now for the election, as I look about, I can see that you're all eligible to vote. And just either, as you know, paper ballots in presence here. And for those of you who are home and those of you who are streaming, you'll see your ballot pop up on the screen. If you have any questions, one way or the other, whether it's with the paper ballot, but if you have any questions at home about how the Zoom ballot operates, please reach out in the chat box and Father John or Jill will respond. Does everybody have a ballot at this point in the room? They do, okay.
And then when you're finished with your ballot, just hold it up in the air and ushers will come by and collect them from you.
Now that you voted, I will give my sixth and final senior warden's report. As I give this report, I look back over the past 6 years and can say without hesitation that we're in the best place we have been during my tenure. We have very positive momentum. You'll hear in a few minutes from Janet Prill, our junior warden, who in 45 minutes will be the senior warden, that we are in the midst of a very successful annual fund campaign, and that we are concluding a record-breaking Inspired by Love campaign. With that, I will say that anybody who's not yet, this is the last year of the Inspired by Love campaign, so anybody who has not fulfilled their full commitment, please do so ASAP. Our treasurer, Tim Dan, will tell you that we ended 2024 in the black because of your generosity, and that the vestry has approved an almost balanced budget for 2025. While we may have hit a speed bump last week, the St. Mark's we know and love has not gone away. We've had other speed bumps over the past 6 years, not the least of which was the pandemic. We have overcome those bumps before, and I'm confident we will do so again. The resiliency of this parish is amazing, that in the time I've been here, each year we've gotten to Christmas time, and we're looking, oh my gosh, are we going to make budget or not? And folks have always come through, and we really appreciate you doing so. This church is wonderful because of you and what you bring to all of us. And we thank you so much for that. We have kept and accelerated our momentum over my time as senior warden because of our great clergy, our staff, our dedicated lay leaders, and all of you. We have had continuity in our clergy and staff, although, as Peter mentioned in his State of the Parish address, we are down one staff member. And as you will hear from Tim, the vestry has voted to invest in our clergy and staff. Peter's been with us almost 17 years. Elizabeth's been with us for over 6 years. John has made an almost perfect, seamless transition from Justin, who was with us for 10 years. And our maestro, Ned, has been with us for almost 6 years. That is really what is keeping us going. And that is why we as a vestry are investing in what keeps us going. And we're so blessed with all these people. These 4 that I mentioned are our Sunday morning faces, but we have others behind the scenes, such as Jan Maines, who runs our church school, and Rob Schwartz, who leads our digital ministry. And I can't not mention Janet. I cannot mention Jill, because Jill does so much. Peter has oftentimes joked that we can get by without the clergy, but we can't get by without Jill. And there is a little bit of truth to that. we do want the clergy to stay here, and that, as I say, we're investing in them. They help the staff help the clergy produce the weekly podcast, help with the music events, and are tirelessly helping the clergy with our Advent Christmas programs, as well as those for Lent and Easter. This past year, our staff, working with our clergy, brought us the Civil Rights Pilgrimage and the Youth Mission Trip. They have been instrumental in putting together the French Cathedral Organ Pilgrimage with Ned, which will leave in 12 days. We have tremendous lay leaders who volunteer countless hours on the vestry, property committee, investment and endowment committee, and the finance committee. And I often have said that if our church, our parish were a congregation or a company, I'd invest all my money in it. We have such talented people here in the church who give so much of their time and energy. In addition to these standing committees, you in this room give your time and effort to lead and work on ministries such as Mayfair, Laundry Love, the Gospel Garden, the Men's Retreat, the Women's Retreat, Altar Guild, Ushers, Chalice Ministers, in the office. And I have to do a special shout out to Deb Luce and Linda Donahue, who are tireless in the office. Without them, we wouldn't be functioning, and they do so on their own. And there are countless other ministries, and I do have to mention and do a shout out for Eliza Bolgren for the flower arrangement bit that she did. I thought it was interesting. There was a program, or it was in the leaflet, talking about this flower arrangement class that she had. And that Sunday that I saw in the program here, I went back, was reading my New Yorker magazine, and saw one of the things about town in New York was a flower arrangement class for $80 a piece, and we did it for free, and so Eliza, we thank you for your efforts on that. In short, we have great momentum because of our clergy, our staff, and you. Thank you all. Before closing, I do want to let you know of a challenge we will be facing in the future. That is our infrastructure, for which we will need capital for repairs. You'll hear more about that going forward from our soon-to-be senior warden. On a personal note, I want to thank you for the privilege of serving you. I have learned so much from so many, and both intellectually and spiritually. It has been an honor, and I thank you. As Peter mentioned, this is the 261st annual meeting. 61 years ago, in connection with the 200th anniversary of the parish. A book was written that talked about the first 200 years of the parish. And Grant Morrill was the rector at that time. We're in his hall right now. And he wrote in the forward to the book, quote, "We have seen the Holy Spirit working in great dimensions, creating great response for many persons," close quote. I have to say that in the 6 years that I've been senior warden and in the 10 years I've served on the vestry, I have seen the Holy Spirit working and seeing the great response from the people in this parish, which is wonderful. I have every confidence that we will continue to do so in the years to come. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. I really appreciate everything. But turn it over. Thank you very much. Yes, yes, I'm sorry.
I'm Liz.
Yes, Liz, how are you?
Staff members to be honored. I would like to add Beth Rolston, Partner Special Project, and Edgar and Ed are Sexton.
I hope you all heard that, and I did not mean to omit anybody, but she was just praising Beth Ralston and Edgar and Ed, who keep things clean sometimes with Charlie's help, I will say. Any questions I should ask? No questions? I'm going to turn it over to Janet now.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Maybe it's afternoon, not quite. I have a particular role here this morning. Please. So it says, I'm going to give you an update on the 2025 annual fund campaign. And you know, Janet Prill, still junior work, I should say. But I'm going to take 1 minute for a couple of comments on my colleague Stan. I have had the pleasure of working with Stan for 3 years now as junior warden. And it has been such an incredible honor and privilege, because to work with a person, a leader who is so steady, so steadfast, has such trustworthiness, and does it all with so much grace. It's been a really great experience to be in this role with you as a partner, Stan, and I appreciate that. So this is my role today on the 2 campaigns, Annual Fund and Inspired by Love. It's the synergy, as Peter mentioned during his address this morning, of the clergy, the staff, and all the people in the parish that energizes the church and all the ministries. It's together that we power the mission of this parish. There's a special group of people who has worked incredibly hard on this campaign, and that is Nancy Walton, our Director of Stewardship and Development, and the fine team that she has put together. Very dedicated professionals from across the segments of our parish, comprised of Elise Armstrong, Laura Clancy, Callie Creighton, Robert Greaves, John Harrison, and Peter Ryan. We have a strong representation across, but we tried also to have a number of people from younger households. This strategy of having a team with continuity across multiple years was one that we learned from the Inspired by Love campaign. And we've really been seeing the benefits of their experience now over 2 campaigns, in learning how to communicate effectively across the parish, what people in the parish need to know, understand, from the early communications of the campaign through now to the follow-up. So we owe them a lot of gratitude for their work on this, and they've had a very successful campaign, which we'll now get into a little bit of detail on. Please look at the left in terms of the goals for the 2025 annual campaign. $1.85 million in support of St. Mark's annual operating budget, and 325 households, which would get us back to actually where we were in 2019 before the pandemic. The pledges and contributions fund every ministry of this parish The lion's share going to worship, music, and spiritual growth, followed by daily operations, outreach, pastoral care, and children and youth, as you can see in the chart on the left. Some people are surprised to learn that St. Mark's is fully self-funded. And you can see the income sources for 2024. A whole 69% came from our contributions to the annual fund. 18% from endowments, and that's an endowment draw we take from the endowments and trusts. And that is getting bigger because of the recent contributions of the Inspired by Love pledges. 13% comes from facility usage and general donations that come throughout the year. Pledging does matter. As you can see, the annual fund covers such a significant percentage of the annual operating budget. It is an important aspect of our funding. It also provides a reliable revenue forecast to the vestry, who we charge with making decisions on budget and other spending decisions. In addition, strong pledging participation and a solid forecast enables the clergy and the staff to focus on ministry, which is really where we want their focus to be. In terms of results to date, we have received 317 pledges as of last Monday, and that's on a goal of 325. We are so close, and we are so pleased with the response from the parish. This is a dollar amount of $1,677,000, and I'd like to compare that with our 2024 results, where we had 264 pledges received for $1,381,000. And note that that's a 21% increase, both in number of households pledging and in the dollar amount. That's pretty great, and thank you. Note also, 42% of pledgers increased their commitment for 2025, and 21% are new or returning pledgers, people who may not have pledged over the past 3 years. Now, this is a really beautiful chart, but it's very busy. So stay with me while I walk you through these bar charts. The left chart shows the dollar amounts given, both in pledges and contributions. The right chart, which we'll get to after, shows the number of giving households. So in the dollar amounts chart, okay. Okay, here we go. Starting in 2019, you'll see we had a drop off in pledging during the pandemic. We showed progress in the ensuing years, as you'll see with the green bar, in overall giving. But we were very concerned with this multi-year drop in pledge amounts. And so concerned by this trend, last year we launched our effort to communicate the importance of pledging to the financial health of the parish. On the right-hand side, this is a different color because it's a forecast bar, but you'll see the red part is the pledges received is 21% higher overall, with the green as well over last year. Now on the right, notice this is the number of households pledging. And we, again, from 2019 in the pandemic, saw a decline of pledging households. This was pandemic, people were not coming to church. We also saw the trend of more young families moving out of New York, coming to the suburbs, joining our parish, etc. And while contributions rose during this time, pledging continued to decrease. But we are so gratified by the response of the parish to the messaging of how important pledging is. As I said, to the financial health of the parish, more young families are pledging now, and it is making a significant difference. to our financial health. This has been incredibly good news for St. Mark's in our ability to make budget and to plan. And we want to give a hearty thank you to everyone. It's gratifying that the message of the critical nature of pledging has really resonated, and people are responding with pledging up 21%. The endowment draw from the endowments and trusts, and this is, I mentioned before, with more inspired by love funds kicking in, was $474,000 in 2024. And as you'll hear more from Tim, we predict that will be $505,000 in this year. All in all, we have felt a great deal of positive energy coming through this campaign. We're grateful and we're hopeful that we can meet our goal and that we can build on this. I'd like to switch gears now to give you an update on the Inspired by Love campaign. As you'll recall, this was a campaign that started in 2022 with an aggressive goal of $7.5 million for the church. And it was led by a campaign team, and I'm going to call out these people who worked hard over a couple of years on this: Brian Hetherington, Suzanne Harrison, Tom Berardino, Don Palmer, and myself. But here we are in 2025, and it is the 4th year in a capital campaign payout. The very, very good news is the amount of money received to date, which you see on the screen, $5,549,000, is 74% of the total pledged. And given that we're 3 years in and a 4-year payout campaign, that's tracking, very appropriately. The pledge balance is approximately 27%, or a little over $2 million. So we are in a good place, but $2 million is a significant sum, and so it deserves the vestry's attention, and it's important that we communicate to everyone that the church is counting on this money for the endowment as well as capital projects, which may be down the road, and it's really important for us to follow this through. Along those lines, we thought it would be informative for you to see how the capital funds that we have received to date have been put to good use here in the church. And so, as you see, the vestry voted that 2/3 of the monies would be put in the endowment and 1/3 could be used for capital projects. So of the $5.5 million received to date, that's about $1.85 million. And so we're showing you in 3 different areas of the campus where these monies have gone: the church, Great Gables, and the church office, and around the campus. In the church, the sound system has been replaced. The reredos has been restored. The stained glass windows, I think, are still in process of being restored. The organ, the boiler, and the roof have all undergone repairs. The bell tower, major repairs, indoor air quality improvements, and the lighting renovation project, not yet kicked off, but being studied for an upcoming project. In Great Gables and the church office, a total HVAC overhaul, which was much needed, adding central air conditioning, converted the heat, replaced the boiler, all the mechanicals. And I have heard that this amount of work and these changes basically saved the building. Attic insulation, asbestos abatement, and other water damage repairs. And around the campus, IT upgrades for communications and security, new website and visual identity, paving in the north driveway, an installation of a pergola in the courtyard in conjunction with the preschool, asbestos abatement and carpeting, capital repairs to clergy housing, and the list goes on. So what are the action items for us? Since this is the final year of the campaign, We decided this would be a good time to kick off our communications efforts to remind everyone about Inspired by Love and all the great things that those monies are doing in our parish. A letter will follow to those households that have balances for the IBL campaign, and they're also shown on all the giving statements in addition to annual fund. So this is an important project for the year for the parish to have a successful close to Inspired by Love. In conclusion, a most sincere thank you to everyone in the parish who has made pledges or contributions to the annual fund campaign, to Inspired by Love, and most of all for your participation in the life of this parish. Thank you for supporting our vibrant community. My next item is to introduce Tim Dan, the treasurer, for the treasurer's report.
You are most graceful. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Janet. Thank you, Stan, earlier for your comments. Can everyone hear me? Looks good. Thank you. Thank you, Jeb, way in the back. The first thing I wanted to just say, I had the pleasure of meeting Stan over a dozen years ago when we were both rookies in the ticket booths of Mayfair. And we all know how brilliant Father Peter is, but he's also very clever. Stan, it was my understanding as your Mayfair treasurer a couple of years ago that Stan successfully managed to move on from ticket sales into an interesting new area. I believe it was the food court. But Father Peter, in his commendation today to Stan, said he's actively involved with ticket sales. So Stan, welcome back. I'm thrilled. All right, good morning now, good afternoon, I guess. And thank you for being here today, taking your time to review our 2024 financial report. My expectation is I'll be efficient here, maybe 12 minutes of your time. I'm keenly aware of the challenges you face in digesting all these figures in real time, but I will do my best to highlight to you those figures that I think are most relevant to our financial condition. All of this and more will be posted on our website, so I encourage you to take time to review it there because there's many, many facts and figures. I'm available, of course, to you via email or telephone should you have any questions. And a spoiler alert, but you've already heard it, the news today that we're reporting is good news. Treasurers aren't known to be recruited as cheerleaders, but I'm going to do my best to be very optimistic because there's reason for that. On our agenda, okay, we're going to take a look at the brief look at the economic context we find ourselves in that impact our financials, a look at our endowment and trust funds, an update on our capital campaign, Inspired by Love, which, as you've heard, is entering its final year for fulfillment, a review of our 2024 financial results and the approved budget for 2025, our current balance sheet in terms of liquidity, a look back at the year's highlights from deep within the Treasury Department's research laboratory. You didn't know that existed. It's way down below our basement. And finally, our objectives for the coming year, okay? So first, let's take a look at inflation. This is a deep history. We're going back 35 years, which is pretty much the duration of my career in financial markets. After experiencing COVID-related increases in inflation to as much as 8% or more in 22 and 23, inflation in general here in recent times has moderated and stabilized to a range of 2.5% to 3% for a number. Okay, here's a chart of interest rates. With that moderation in inflation, the Federal Reserve Bank, which had been increasing short-term rates to fight the surge in inflation, commenced a series of rate decreases in 2024, which we can see in blue here, the targeted FOMC overnight rate. As the year came to a close, the Fed had lowered Fed funds target rate by 100 basis points to 4 3/8%. Longer-term rates, however, in this case, our proxy is in red. We're using the 10-year Treasury yield. Longer-term rates actually increased over the course of the year. You can see that. with, in recent weeks, the longest dated 30-year Treasury bond flirted with the 5% yield level. Market participants, it seems to me, are unsure of the impact to the economy and the federal budget of tariffs and potential tax cuts being considered by our new leadership in Washington. Rising interest rates are a headwind for economic growth and produce losses for our existing fixed income investments. However, the flip side of the coin is they provide more attractive returns for new money put to work in that asset class. St. Mark's continues to benefit from interest income we realize on our general reserves, which are invested in overnight monies. Turning to the stock market, 2024 was a year of solid returns. Again, this is 35 years of history with all kinds of epics that we recall that achieved a name in the markets. And more recently is this tremendous upswing that we see. In this graph, we look at share prices on a logarithmic scale where the slope of a straight line reflects a constant rate of return. And distances along the x-axis are equal differences in percentage change. So again, we've had a strong 2024. That said, metrics like price earnings ratios and dividend yields reflect the optimism in the market in the form of valuation expansion. Might we see a 20% correction in the unforeseen future? No doubt we will, but when and from what level? Remember that we outsource the management of our endowment, and our managers are by intent not engaging in market timing. So should that happen, it happens. Nothing we can do about it. Okay, in terms of our endowment and trust, I remind you that we have two major categories of long-term invested funds. Our endowment managed by the Bank of America as part of the Episcopal Church in Connecticut's Donations and Bequests Fund, and our beneficial share in the Lancaster Trust, which is managed by Deutsche Bank. As you will recall, we currently are engaged in adding funds to our D&B endowment via donations received from the Inspired by Love Capital campaign. The Lancaster Trust Fund is static in that there are no external funds added to it, and we have effectively no say in its management. We draw income from both on a monthly basis into our operations. Increasing our D&B endowment is a significant component of our strategy to help address what in recent years had been a fairly stagnant level of pledged income, as Janet has told us. At the end of 2024, our D&B endowment was at $9.5 million, shown here in red, and the Lancaster Trust was just under $2 million in brown. The combined total of $11.5 million was up $1.6 million over December of 2023. Overall, we see in the pie chart, overall the combined portfolio is held 69% in equities at the end of the year. Lancaster Trust, the more aggressively positioned of the two, held almost 83% in equities, compared to D&B at 66%. Further underscoring the riskier stance of the Lancaster Trust, 26% of the overall portfolio, 26 of the total, was invested in the U.S. information technology sector. And half of that, about 13% of the entire portfolio, was held in the single stock NVIDIA, which is in the news regularly because it's just had an incredible run. So good for D&B, but it is the riskier of the two, because if we are in a downturn, we will suffer the flip side of that coin. Okay, this slide here is just a summary of the flow of funds in and out of D&B and Lancaster Trust for 2024. Okay, so we see that we started at just under 10 million. We had additions through the IBL campaign of 739,000. Our draw between the two totaled nearly 475,000. Market income and gain added 1.3, and we ended up at 11.5. Again, 1.6 increase over where we started. At the bottom are just some indicators of market indicators. We see the S&P 500 had a huge year. It's market cap weighted, and it's highly concentrated in IT. So in some sense, it's very similar to the Lancaster Trust. So it outperformed other measures like the Russell 2000, which is an equal weighted measure. It returned 10% in terms of the index price change over the year. The Russell 2000 is a more appropriate proxy for the type of investing that donations and bequests engages in. We already mentioned that the Fed funds target rate was lowered by 100 basis points. The most recent meeting this past week, they paused, so we'll see what happens there. But even though they lowered 100 basis points in overnight funds, the U.S. two-year Treasury note was unchanged on the year at 4.25%. And the 10-year note actually increased, as we mentioned earlier, in this case by 72 basis points to almost 4.6%. This slide you've already seen for the most part. Janet shared with you. There's a little slightly different spin in terms of the information on it, but the content is the same. We're almost 3/4 fulfilled in receipts from pledges on the IBL campaign. We have just under 2.1 million outstanding. And of that, almost 1.4 million will end up adding to the endowment, the D&B, and another almost 700,000 will go towards our capital expenditures. On hand, from a capital perspective, we've basically spent everything that we've received so far. So you can see we have a small amount. I'll take the moment, you've heard this already, that this is our final year for fulfillment. As it turns out, our calculation for the draw has a fiscal year that ends on October 31st. Your fiscal year, of course, from a tax perspective, ends like the calendar on December 31st. So most of us tend to start thinking about those donations in the month of December. But in terms of getting those funds in and making them impactful as soon as possible to our draw calculation, if we can get those pledges in before October 31st, that will be greatly appreciated. Okay, an update on our endowment draw forecast. We present this every year for the last couple of years. The D&B calculation is separate from the Lancaster Trust. I mentioned Lancaster Trust. We sort of have no say over it. We can make requests to increase the draw, which is what we do, but there's no calculation, there's no formula, as opposed to the D&B portion of our funds. It's formulaic. It uses, at October 31st, the preceding 12 quarters, average share price, looks at the number of shares we own, the product of the two, creates a basis from which we apply a percentage to draw from. So last year's numbers included these light gray numbers all the way to this point, actually October of 23. And at this point, a year ago, I gave you a forecast of a band, these gray bars, predicting where we thought those share prices would fall in 2024. And as it turns out, they fell within that range. So our calculation this year that was just done on October 31st used all the blue diamond figures. We are forecasting a single point forecast going forward in red with these squares at a 6.5% rate of increase for the share price. Bottom line is, down at the bottom, what we expect our draw, including an estimate for the Lancaster Trust to be. As Janet mentioned, for 2025, we are scheduled to draw 505,000 between the two. And by 2028, we expect that our forecast is that figure will have increased by over 25% to just over 632,000, as it turns out. Okay, be real quick on this. This is slide 10. So these are our pie charts for sources and uses of funds for 2024 and some history behind it. In 2024, 69%, as you've heard from Janet, our revenue came from pledge, gift, and plate, and 18% in green came to our operations via the draw between the two sources. In general, over time, the green, the endowment draw, has been increasing. and the pledge and plate component has been decreasing as a ratio. So for example, in 2019, our draw was 10.6% of revenue. You see, 2024, it was 18%, and by 2027, we expect it to be almost actually double the level it was in 2019, so at over 22% of our income. In terms of expenses, again, similar chart describing where our expenses fall. We are clearly a people business, right? Both in terms of revenue, 69%, and in terms of expenditure. 64% of our monies go to staffing our mission, our ministries and operations. Okay, this is the big one. Yes, thank you. So lots and lots of data here, and I know it is a challenge to digest in the here and now, let alone for some of you in the room, I know you're probably struggling to even see the numbers before you on the screen. So while I want to make it simple and large as possible, I also don't want to eliminate what I think are very valuable pieces of information like percentage shares in blue of totals, like change year on year in red. So even though the data is summarized here, it's still fairly dense. I get that. But please take the time to spend with this once it's posted online. In the interim, I will do my best to point to you what I think are the most important aspects. So last year, the 2024 budget is not on here, but last year when we met, we did not have an adopted budget, in part because we didn't like it at all. Our bottom line, if those of you may recall, was for a deficit of over $100,000. That was just felt, that's not acceptable. We have to do something about this. Hence, Janet's appeal last year for your pledges for 2024, and you responded tremendously. So thank you for that. By the time our vestry did adopt a budget, we had improved that over $100,000 deficit to a deficit of $49,000. So not shown here, but our budgeted deficit for 2024 was $49,000 in deficit. Way down here at the bottom, you can see our current estimate. Yes. Our current estimate for the year is, as was said, to finish in the black by over $50,000. An incredible accomplishment. How did we do that? We finished with several positive revenue surprises versus our budget. Stewardship and gift giving surpassed the budget by some $66,000. Plate and 2023, the prior year stewardship funds received in the first quarter of 24 actually exceeded budget, what we had in the budget, by another $18,000. Mayfair was a $25,000 surprise to the positive over what we had budgeted, and interest income here in the all other category turned out to be another $25,000 over what we had budgeted. All told, our positive revenue surprises added up to $135,000 over what we had budgeted. On the expense side, a positive financial surprise came in for the wrong reason. And that was, I think, as you've heard, Father Peter spoke to it as well, that we lost an administrative employee early in the year, and we're not able to replace that employee. So comp and benefits that came in were estimated at $1.62 million here. We're actually $32,000 under budget, in large part for that reason. Negative surprises on the expense came in utilities. You see our utilities came in for the year at just over $150,000, and our budget for the year was $110,000. So a $40,000 hit there, almost entirely due to a pretty sizable, over 40% increase in our electricity rates. We have contractual rates for our electricity for a period of time that expired. We had a new rate. It was significantly higher. You've probably all seen that at home. Other expense surprises to the negative came in at $25,000 over budget. In total, expense surprises were $33,000 over budget. The net of those two That netted against the $135,000 positive surprise to revenue. We ended up turning that $49,000 budgeted deficit into that surplus of over $51,000. So fantastic year. Thank you all. I mean, folks really responded to the appeal for pledging and gifts, and even more so for 2025. So turning to 2025 for the budget, as we've heard from Janet, our stewardship campaign is doing very well. Our goal is 1.85 million, as you've heard. However, for the budget before you here, which is in green on the right, our staff with the green eye shades down in the Treasury Department knocked the 185 goal back to 1.8 million. They tend to be a little conservative perhaps, but I think that's a reasonable estimate. So that combined with a plate of $45,000 in the budget and an expectation we'll receive another $30,000 of late 2024 pledge commitments that show up in the first quarter of 2025 gets us to this 1.875 million revenue figure, okay, which is a 3.8% increase over 2024, and that in turn was a strong year. So a type of increase we've not seen in recent years, but we did it in 24. We're well on our way to doing it in 25. Mayfair, 110,000. We know that can swing one way or the other as the weather swings. Our total budget revenue for 25 is 2.7 million, 2.8% increase over the prior year, which in itself was a significant increase over 2023. On the expense side, comp and benefits shown here at 1,763. Again, hard to see, but that if we look at that rate of increase over 24, that's 8.8%. However, that's an apples and oranges comparison. As we spoke about, our realized figure of 162 in comp and benefits for 24 was without one administrative employee. So the proper comparison is to look at 25 budget versus 24 budget, which included that employee. So the increase is not, the relevant increase is 6.7% if we look at it budget to budget. Total budget expenses are budgeted to increase 3.7%. Excuse me, that's not right, 5.5% over 2024. And our bottom line that shows with these figures is for a deficit of $16,000. That amount is effectively a rounding error on a $2.7 million budget. It could easily swing by a few tens of thousands, as we've seen. So I feel very comfortable with that. It's effectively balanced, particularly if we look at our history. If we go back at our net from 2020 through 2024, that's 5 years worth of nets, and these figures add up to a positive if you look at the bottom line. I feel like we're in great shape financially. This slide, a quick look at our liquidity. We take our cash and securities from the balance sheet and remove these items, which are held in this case for the preschool, held for other reasons. We get to sort of a proxy for our liquidity, our free liquidity of $837,000. That said, of that amount at year end, $325,000 were 2025 pledges that were received by the end of 2024. Net that out, we get a 500,000-ish figure. Okay, a review of highlights from last year. We added 3, what I think are pretty significant and helpful reporting tools. One is the stewardship dashboard, which helps us report and estimate progress on our stewardship campaign. Closely related to that is a giving forecast that uses historical patterns on monthly pledge, gift, and plate receipt to estimate where our current year revenues to date will end up by the end of the year. We also instituted a 3-year operating forecast model for use in decision-making by our leadership, our various committees, Finance Committee and the Investment and Endowment Committee, and by the vestry. We moved bill payment to bill.com, which is a service that provides processing and approval of bill payment, but more significantly allows recipients of those payments to opt to receive them via physical check or via ACH or a number of other alternatives, which they on their end set up. So it saves us the resource, which is very, very thin, that resource of having to go out to individual vendors and arrange for ACH paperwork, et cetera. So this is a great way to move with ease from physical checks, which are in this day and age are insecure, basically, represent security hazards, I should say. So that's a great development. Finally, we enhanced integration with St. Mark's preschool financial leadership. So I'm passionate about this. This is something, you know, if I accomplish any particular one thing, or help, I should say, to accomplish, it's this. You know, our preschool is fantastic. We know that, but we haven't been as integrated with them as we think we should be. So that's a perfect segue into our 2025 objectives. I'll jump right down here to the next to the last, which is the preschool. They've long had on their agenda to update their bylaws. Again, you know, it's been on our agenda as well. And again, it's a resource issue, like many things. We haven't gotten to it. We want to get to it desperately. It's our objective for 2025. We have one employee retention tax credit that remains outstanding, approximately $111,000. You've, I'm sure, seen in the press, there's been a lot of fraud associated with that, not related obviously to us, but that fraud has caused the IRS to slow roll the whole thing. And as near as I can tell, it effectively has stopped in terms of processing. They still owe us the money. They owed us that last year. I don't know what's going to happen there, but we stay tuned. We have tremendous leadership on our investment and endowment committee, some of whom have agreed to stay on. But as folks roll off of that, we need to add members. Cash flow management for our capital projects, as you saw on an earlier slide, the monies we've received from IB&L committed to capital projects have largely been used. So we have projects that need doing, and we're waiting on funds to come in, but there's a little bit of a coordination there that we need to do. You've already heard about increasing usage of ACH using bill.com. And continued improvements. This is not just a fluffy general thing. This is very active. You know, we have introduced this past year some pretty nice new tools for us to use. And we're constantly, principally Jill and I are talking about what can we do better and how can we do it. So lastly, you guys, you know, I'm preaching to the choir. You guys know this, the membership is incredible. Our committee members are brilliant. And we all benefit from them, and I've listed as many as I could think of here. And I'm sure there are others. Certainly there are others who've served prior to that. That's the one thing I know. You talk to somebody, they're like, oh yeah, I was, you know, warden 15 years ago. Wow. So thank you everybody for your contributions, those on this list and those who aren't. I think that's pretty much it for that I have. If there are any questions, I would do my best to answer them in the here and now. Otherwise, once you've had time to digest things, I'm available by email and phone.
Yeah.
Yes.
How did our endowment finish the calendar year? The two parts of the endowment, what was the total number after draw?
Thanks, Bill. So here they are in blue, the Lancaster Trust, and in green, D&B, and of course on the right are the sum of the two. And the one thing I failed to point out but meant to is that if we look at simply at where we ended versus where we started, they both, surprise, surprise, they're just under 16%. in terms of end value versus start value. That said, Lancaster Trust, being the more aggressive, with big help from NVIDIA, had an income gain component that was 20%, versus D&B only 11.6. So how did we get to a similar ending value in terms of percentage change? Well, that was through the donations from the IB&L campaign, which are only going into donations and bequests. And that 739,000 was 9% of the starting value.
So Tim, it's fair to say,
Yeah.
we're at 11.4 million at the end of the year. That's the first time we've been above 10 million, isn't it?
That is, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Bill. As if I had anything to do with it. I'm just a bean counter, so thank you. All right. Yes.
Congratulations for getting this on budget and on time, but I'm assuming that something was left on the floor that you would have preferred to have in the budget, you would prefer for even more contribution. So just to keep us active and alert, not satisfied, what got left on the floor that you wish hadn't been left on?
Wow, that is, I mean, you guys blow me away. That is a great question. So to that end, we considered a month or two ago that when it came to budgeting, you know, how about we have two budgets, right? One which represents what we would like to accomplish. And of course, that would include probably somebody like a communications director, or as an example, right? Somebody who could help us with materials and communicating, et cetera. And so we'll do one budget, which is, if we could be fully funded, this is how we'd like to operate. And then we'll do another one that's more like what we're accustomed to, which is, well, this is what we think is more real world. So great question. We did not produce those two budgets, in part, again, resource, you know, who's going to do that? But we've had many conversations along those lines, including a member of the Investment Endowment Committee, Matt LeBaron, who sent me an email with some suggestions right along those lines of how we could plan for the future financially, particularly using the endowment as a tool for funding that, you know, scenario of what we would like to accomplish. So, you know, it's staffing, really, but it's also repairs around the campus. I mean, this campus is tremendous, and we all know as homeowners what it costs to operate and repair and maintain roofs and things like that. So it's those two things. It's staff and it's capital expenditures. Thank you.
Before I report the results of the vestry election, I would just like to thank everyone who agreed to run. And thank you also to the nominating committee who put together such an esteemed group of candidates. Without further ado, I would like to congratulate the 2028 class of vestry. Alix Armstrong, Peter Ryan, Kathy Ulane, and John Harrison. And for the nominating committee, Gabby Beecher, Rob Kerr, and Lori Wyckoff. Congratulations, everyone.
Just as we finish up here, I'd like to congratulate all those who were not elected, joining a long list of eminent people not elected, myself included. I love to tell the story. Once I wasn't, I mean, I've never been really elected to anything. One time it happened in Ohio, and the bishop said to me, "Oh, it wasn't like you didn't get elected, you got crushed." So anyway, which is not the case for anybody here, and so grateful for everybody. Also, Doug, it's a phenomenal question, and one of the things that I found that Tim answered is that we, just to be, you know, because we're always telling you the way it is, we found it difficult, given the pace and the space that we have in our lives, to lay out for the congregation, for all of you, what it was that we would like to do if we had more funds. and Tim spoke to that. But a lot of it is, isn't that sexy? What is happening is that the way the staff works is that if you've ever been in a car that's not great and you've been on a very busy and fast highway and you really need to be in the outside lane, but your car only goes so fast. And so your engine revs at an amount, at a level that it's not great for the long run of the car. And that's what happens with the staff. The staff revs at a level. And when I mentioned that there's things that we don't get done, if we were to have the funds when it comes to staffing, there's many areas where there's an additional person might do, but we might refer to that to communications and engagement. A lot of that has to do with helping the ministries, the lay ministries of the church get along, because they do need somebody on the staff to pay attention. Without that, it's very, very difficult for us to sustain. So that is probably where we would put this person. If we had even more funds, we would certainly desire in an area to throw more funds into youth ministry and to support. I mean, if you knew what Father John's life was like, you'd be in the oy vey category, and how much he juggles and how exciting it is that they have youth interested. But we just aren't staffed to really be able. Father John doesn't have time to show up to plays and kids' soccer games and all the stuff that goes into youth ministries. That's another area. So there is much more of that. And now I'm super grateful to those of you who are with us in Zoom and those who are here. But I want Elizabeth to do the blessing because she's not off. Remember I said she goes off at 1 o'clock? So before she goes on her sabbatical, she's still got 14 minutes.
I don't have a 14-minute blessing.
That's
I thought one thing fell on the floor was the podcast has been so successful and we were going to get hair and makeup, but I'm the only one with hair. So. Well, Mom, what you see is what you get. So anyway, thanks to all of you who put together this incredible meeting. And I'm always so amazed and I bow to the hard work and the brilliance that goes into managing this church. It's a thing of beauty. So we're all very grateful. Okay. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and bring you peace. And the blessing of God Almighty, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be among you this day and remain with you always. Amen. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Right?